Hi, Jeff. Sitting in a parked car. None of them are working with the Germans videos here, and I'm looking down. I don't want to set it there because it kind of hangs and stuff. So it's just easier to put it here. Um, the one I want to mention today is about the perspective of Germans on money. Um, and it's really interesting. I had a talk with one of my German professor that I had years ago. Um, who when he'd teach German classes to adults, he would not just he would teach them things about the culture and not just the language, right? And I brought him over to actually give language class. I hired him to actually do language classes for the company I work for, or at least for the Employees Association. And so we had a lot of real discussions really about really interesting things about money and how different cultures can perceive money. And one of the things he said about German culture, what he said about German cultures is that I'm sorry, I'm trying to get the lighting here to get cut out the lighting to get all this out of here. So um, and so he mentioned that he said that Germans are really into long-term investments. And I mentioned this in my long-term versus short-term, right? But here I'm talking about money. And so he said that the Germans are really into anything that is investment. And we're not talking about investments as a good investment, okay? We either be careful to think about return on investment that you can actually sell it and get money off it. Again, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about ephemeral versus short-term satisfaction versus long-term. We can get more long-term satisfaction for the same thing over a long term. Okay, that's a different thing than getting than what's called investment. You got to make a difference of this. So short-term satisfaction means that the thing that you're benefiting from will only have a duration of a short term of like a week vacation or something, right? Or a meal, you know, half an hour to an hour to 2 hours, right? Versus a vehicle like a car that you're going to get the satisfaction for a number of years. It doesn't mean in the end you're going to sell the car and get the money off it again. That's not what we're talking about. It's the fact that you got satisfaction with this thing that you bought or this something you bought or paid for, right? Over a longer period of time. Uh, Longer than 1 hour, longer than a day. It could be years. It could be 2 years. A phone, can be a thing that you only. Some people have to change their phones more. I don't change my phones as much, right? So, but that can be a longer term satisfaction depending on how long it is, right? But it's an investment because you're investing money in this thing and you're choosing to have satisfaction rather than buy a bunch of short term things, right? Short term satisfaction things. So I think this is a really important thing to understand when we're talking about different countries and how they perceive short term, long term, and money, and how they perceive investments, because investments are not always how much return on the investment can I get. Now that's a pure financial thing, and then people have a different perspective of that too. But I'm talking about the this is along the indulgence versus restraint topic, right? It's kind of a mixture, and so the Germans will talk about that. And so one of my colleagues, it was interesting, was telling me that in a meeting, so as a non-German colleague who had lived in Germany a long time, said that in a meeting, it was amazing how the Germans in meetings, he said that they talked more about their cars than they did about their children. They seemed they valued their cars more than they valued their children. Now, doesn't that sound interesting? That's really interesting. And this does fit along this kind of fits into this short term, long term investment or whatever, because a car is seen as an asset. Okay, a car is seen as an asset, and so it's long term assets. And when you buy, you buy long term assets, right? You don't buy children, you have them. Well, in the end, you got to pay for them, right? So you got to pay for them, but that's a different thing because those end up being those experiences ended up being short-term services because you got to, like, the kids got to eat and got to do that. It doesn't come to until the moment where the child has to begin buying things of assets of longer term. That is a car or a motorcycle or a whatever or a house, or where your parents begin to bring back into thing the long term. And and so this fits into the long-term investment, the long-term approach to looking at indulgence versus restraint. This is really interesting to see how different cultures see this. Um, so the Germans, and bringing this up, this restraint versus indulgence in the short term and the long term, are really important to see how do Germans perceive, yeah, their assets. They're talking about the cars, not about that, versus about talking about the children. Really interesting. Now we'll talk about the French one because the French talk about the children, right? They don't. It's no, it's all about indulgence. Well, we'll talk about that one in another video, right? Um, but it's really interesting to see how you know, this is so key to, that statement, that they value and even talk more about their cars than their children. Super interesting statement, and something to reflect on, because I'm going to talk in the other ones about how others see it, right? How the Americans see it, and how the French see it, because it's a different approach. So got to go watch those ones to get that one, because I'm not going to reveal that here. That'd be a spoiler, right? You can't give a spoiler in the other book. You got to go watch the video of the other book. They're all free anyway, so it's no big deal, right? So Jeff out. Hope you liked it.